Welcome back to another video. It's been a long time, but we have old cousin Dan.
Hello.
Back on the channel. As you can probably tell, we have a crazy day today. But we were having like a good couple of discussions, so we thought why not share them with you so you can join the discussions in the comments as always. We were basically discussing the last video, don't know if you remember, how artisanal brands basically can survive, etc., what challenges they face. And as you might know, Dan is an artist, so we had this discussion like from a fashion creator perspective in comparison to an artist, like are there similar challenges, where are the differences, etc. We are having this discussion live on air.
Yeah, and also kind of to maybe draw parallels or differences. I mean,
Yeah, both.
I think our way of working is kind of similar. I think just the result then is obviously a different one because you're more in the fashion side and I'm more in the art side. But I think our general philosophy, I guess, is very similar. And relates to the way artisans work and how the industry really isn't built for that kind of way of working, or actually more way of thinking. I guess maybe that's maybe the first point and also the most important point, because it's not only necessarily a way of working, it's also a way of being, I think, because I mean, I can speak for myself, and I think you probably would agree that everything we do, how we brand ourselves, how we try to stay relevant, is inherently connected to how we are as a person. I think if, let's say, for example, if we were, I guess, maybe social media friendly in a way, we would be more active on social media than we already are. Yeah. But it's ingrained in our system that we almost can't be that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And like we're both introverts.
Yeah.
And people, when I tell people I'm an introvert, they can't believe it. But don't forget, like I'm talking to a camera in a room by myself.
And you're surrounded
today,
you know?
with him, but it's not like a group of people.
Yeah.
Right? So it is different, yeah. And I think also like the reason, or because of our similarities in the way we work, our values, etc.
Yeah.
That's also why we collaborated a couple of times.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And we will in the future again.
Absolutely.
Right?
You know, I think I gotta get going. No, yeah, absolutely. I think our way of working together is very informed by our own way of seeing things that really match each other. I don't think it's necessarily important if you collaborate to like the same artist or like the same brand. I mean, it helps, of course, but it's also very interesting when you don't like the same brands or artists, where you can learn from each other.
Absolutely.
But even before that, yeah, I think our way of working kind of matches perfectly because we come from a same, I guess, maybe social background and also intellectually speaking, I think we view things the same way, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and that's why I think it makes so much sense to have this discussion.
Yeah.
To get a different point of view, but still the same values. We've talked about like the difficulties or challenges from an artisanal fashion perspective. Maybe let's focus then more on the artist side. I think that there are a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
Obviously, are creating. You have to show your work somehow.
Yeah.
You have to connect to customers,
Yeah.
community, etc. So maybe let's start with a high-level summary. Like, what do you think? Like, what's your experience been so far, or challenges, but also positive sides, right? That's
Yeah. Of course. I think it was Van Gogh who had this like semi-famous quote that I always liked, where he said, "You know, if I could have chosen it, I would have never been an artist." And I always liked that quote because I think oftentimes today on social media and other platforms, people tend to glorify the essence of what it means to be an artist. Being an artist really doesn't mean being intellectually skilled or technically skilled or whatever. Being an artist actually means first and foremost driving from point A to point B to pick up stuff and supplies and like driving around mad, and creating is only the last part in that, you know. I think you could agree with like letter work. And so I found that quote always very, very fascinating, because in my nature I'm very content in solitude, and I'm not against social conduct, but I'm very content with just being by myself and creating by myself. The challenge, I think, as per your work, arises when you kind of necessarily have to show the work eventually. I mean, you can always just work and don't show anything and go unnoticed, but I don't think that's the point. And that also doesn't derive from like a need to be seen or to be recognized or to become famous or whatever. It's more so that you have this ingrained feeling of wanting to contribute to the world in a meaningful way. And my meaningful way is with art, with writing, with poetry, whatever. Your meaningful way is with leather and products and art itself. And I then think, like you said, connecting that to the selling point or the selling part of it is very difficult.
Yeah, I agree. And not only like the way you sell, but do you feel comfortable selling?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Not only, I think becoming comfortable with selling and the way you sell is something that you can learn, definitely. But I think that our way of working doesn't necessarily coincide with how the world and a capitalistic oriented world actually runs. If you want to work on the fringes of it, especially talking like, for example, like gallery representation, and in your case like store representation, or being in stores with your product. Do you actually need it, or can you go without it? I think that's a big question that maybe is never answered until the moment where you're actually starting to comfortably make a living with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think like referencing the last video, you know, when I think about like making bags and the whole process, right? You have an idea, then you sketch, then you make a pattern, then you make a prototype, then you adjust the pattern, then you make a second prototype, etc., until you reach the point of the finalized product. But that's only half of the process, right?
Yeah.
Then you have to take pictures.
Yeah.
Like pictures for your store, then you have to take context pictures, etc. A video maybe, who knows? And
social media presence.
Exactly, all that kind of stuff, and then you have to sell it. And that's like a very long chain.
Yeah.
What I like the most is making the product.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like I really want to focus on making the product, and that, like in my opinion, speaks for stores, right? Because they are specialized, they know how to sell, and that's their but the focus of their job.
Yeah.
So I think could potentially be easier to just say, okay, I focus only on making stuff.
Yeah.
And then I give it to somebody else who focuses on all the other stuff. And I think like if you're doing the whole chain by yourself, and that's what I'm experiencing myself, is it is so much.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
And you have to be an expert in online marketing, website building, making a product, finances, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think in terms of art, with galleries, for example, I think that's a very comfortable and logic way, or logic-oriented way of processing art, consuming art, and selling art. Actually, the only question I have in that regard is, how do you facilitate the process of becoming an established artist that is run by a gallery, that sells your product, just like a store that sells your product? You you have to almost attain a certain level of being comfortable with that, and also of recognition, I guess, where that is actually possible. And that process is, I don't know if it's the same with you, but I'm guessing it is. The process is so outside of yourself because, like you said, you have the finished work, the finished bag, the finished artwork, whatever. And I too would then just say, well, I'm done. I mean, I don't know why I should need to do more. Now, don't get me wrong. I love talking about my work and contextualizing the work because I think it's important. I think it's important for me to give it clarity for myself, but also I enjoy when other people have their own interpretations of it. Absolutely.
But do you then think like, or would you be scared then if your piece hangs in a gallery and the gallery owner would then sell it or have the conversation with a potential customer, that person cannot 100% represent your interpretation or your feelings of that piece?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember talking with another friend of mine, and he also, I love talking in quotes because it gives me clarity in a way, but he was talking about Michel Lamy and Rick Owens, where they once said that they do just the product. Whatever happens with the product when it goes in the hands of somebody else, they don't care. They're happy that the product exists. And I can relate and agree to that to a certain extent. I have real trouble letting go of anything into the hands of somebody else that may misinterpret it. And that's also obviously a very selfish way of doing it. And obviously it shouldn't be like that to a certain extent. But it's very hard to let that part of yourself go or be comfortable with it.
I mean, it shows passion, right?
I mean, it shows passion, but I mean, playing devil's advocate, shouldn't it not bother us when the product is finished and whatever happens to it in the world happens to it? Shouldn't that be just a byproduct?
Well, I would say it is a bit different for me than it is for you, probably.
Yeah.
So for me, I always have, so the tagline for Skinner is objectified emotions, right?
Yeah.
And I always have a specific emotion in mind when I'm creating a product.
Yeah.
But I never communicate that.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is very personal to me.
Yeah.
But then also B, I want the customer basically who buys the product to have his or her own interpretation. Yeah. I'm saying her because I'm launching a women's collection very soon.
Exactly. Tagline.
No, but that's, so I'm open for interpretation.
Yeah.
But what I'm picky about is the hard facts, right? Where does the leather come from? How is it created by hand versus machine? How are the edges finished? All those kind of stuff.
The technique also,
That's what I'm very picky about, but interpretation-wise, I'm happy to give the freedom to everybody. But then there's also the difference, right, between what you do and I do.
Yeah.
Like obviously you need a technique and the skill, but I think the focus on art is way more on intellectual
and emotional side of it. And I think in art you have to articulate that. And I mean I love doing that because I mean I do the 24/7 no matter what, and if somebody else comes along and wants to learn about the product, then I'm all the more happy to express my feelings towards it. It's almost like letting somebody in on your deepest secret without actually telling the secret. It's a little bit like sugarcoating it so that everybody kind of gets the message but has enough freedom so that they can interpret it the way they want, and so that I feel comfortable and also kind of protected in my way to still have that very intimate relationship with the artwork, you know what I mean? It's a very tricky thing to do, especially like in social media and like with galleries and exhibitions and other people. And this is by no means to sound pretentious or that I'm not thankful for everything. Of course I am, but it's very difficult when the medium doesn't really match the message. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, speaking of medium, how do you feel like when you, let's say you post a picture on social media about your work, do you think it does it justice? Like in terms of, do you see everything the way you want to see on like a small screen versus reality? Or how do you communicate that also in the comment section? I know you write a lot.
Yeah, I think in art and canvases and painting, I think it's almost impossible to really get the point and also the tactility of the work on social media. I think I still, if I'm being honest, enjoy posting on social media when I do, because it feels natural. If I'm on the way to post something and I realize, it feels forced, or it feels like I'm doing it because I think I have to do it, then I leave it be for a couple of days. But when the moment is fitting, I gladly do it. With writing, for example, I think it's a little bit different because writing can exist digitally, kind of. I would think has the same effect on somebody, because it's still words on, well, a digital document or paper. Also, words are or give more clarity than paintings. Paintings are very vague and are very subjective. Writing is very precise, or at least my way of writing is very precise and is very trying to get to a certain point, and so it's a little bit different of a relationship. But I'm reminded of when you once either sent me or we were talking about an artist that doesn't do any social media, like how to be an artist in the 21st century without any social media. And I would say that if I were able to reach that point where I don't need social media, I would 100% gladly take that route.
I think everybody would. I think everybody would. Well, I definitely would.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm at an age like where I've spent the majority of my life without social media.
True. Good point.
So I really miss the analog days.
Yeah.
When you made an appointment with somebody, or you, like with friends to meet, and somebody couldn't come, like they couldn't reach you.
Yeah.
You were
They just
waiting.
didn't come.
Yeah, they just didn't come. I mean, I miss those days, but at the same time, obviously, like it still has a lot of value, like from a consumer perspective.
For sure.
But also from a brand perspective. I mean, Germany is like a small market for Skinosh, for example. Like I ship to the US, Asia, etc., across Europe as well.
Yeah.
But Germany is definitely not the biggest market, and like that's all markets that I would be missing, right?
Yeah.
If there was no social media.
Exactly.
That's how you reach them.
Exactly.
So I know everybody hates social media, but everybody uses it every day.
Yeah.
Everybody's addicted. So it's kind of this love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think like when you want to run your passion as a business, there's no way around it, and you have to utilize the tools the best that you can.
Yeah, of course.
And I think it doesn't have to be Instagram only, right? It can be different channels.
Absolutely.
As you are watching on YouTube, for example. So it can be different things, and it can be it's like a white canvas, basically, right? You can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool, I think.
I think too, and I think, I mean, with you it's a little bit different because you have, like factually speaking, you have your personal Instagram account and the Skinosh account. In my case, I have one account that is I always say it's very impersonal, actually. I think everybody kind of says that at the end of the day, Instagram is very personal because it's your own physical being digitally basically. But I always try very hard for my channels to be the least, sounds weird, but the least personal to me, to my person, and the most personal to the work, if that makes sense. Like almost like a corporation would run their social media. It just happens to be that it's my own personal account, you know what I mean?
That's a very interesting point, because on the one hand I think, okay, in our cases, our brand is our person.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
But I remember like when I started the Skinosh Instagram account, they used like post way more like personal stuff.
Okay, yeah.
Like personal comments, like in stories, also like with smoking cigars and like all those kinds of things. And then I thought at some point, okay, you have to be more, not professional is the wrong word, but like focus on, like people come to a certain account to watch certain things. And if you go too broad, that's a good point.
Yeah. And also like differentiating almost the target audience between one account and the other, and making it more really like a brand account. I don't know if that's redundant to say, but it's interesting because with brands you obviously have Instagram account of the brand and maybe then the one of the creator. In art, most of the time, if you want to look at an artist on Instagram, you're gonna search their name. It's not like they have a brand, except if they own a gallery or whatever. So you almost immediately feel connected to them. And most of the time, every at least young or contemporary artist will post in their Instagram story something more personal than maybe other times. So it's a interesting dichotomy between how you want your work to be seen and perceived, and how you and your person wants to be perceived. You know what I mean? Maybe it doesn't even want to be perceived. I'd be gladly taking a step back or a seat back and let the work speak. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the question is like, how can you enable the work to speak? Right?
Yeah.
And then social media is just one channel for enablement, basically.
Yeah.
Another one would be a gallery.
Yeah.
So would you say then, is it like for an artist, like is there a preferred way, like everybody's goal to be represented by a gallery, or do you think it makes sense for some to go direct to consumer? If I call it that, how it is for Skinner, for example, where it makes more sense.
I think it's very different, and it depends on the person. It depends on how much work you put into it and how dedicated you are to it, I guess. Because I would say that even if it's a very old tradition, the one of the gallery being like the intermediate seller for the artist, it's still a system that works, and it's a system that I would say every artist would be lying if they were to say I don't want that. Yet at the same time, I think some artists have a bigger sensibility than others. I say that more with like almost a negative connotation and a positive one, because that very high sensibility for how your work is perceived, how you're actually doing, how you're feeling, how you fit into the art world, how you make yourself fit into it, all these things, they have to match each other, and they have to also, most importantly, match a gallery or a third person, whoever that might be. Can also be a collector too. If that doesn't match, I would say refrain from just taking the traditional route of the gallery, of the collectors, of the museum, whatever, if your sensibility is taken aback by doing that. At the same time, I think it's important to, like many of us are doing, like you are doing, to treat your passion like a job at a certain point. Because if you, it really depends on how you act on it. It can just be a hobby and it can just be a pastime, or you can professionalize it. It all lies in your hands and in your capabilities.
I mean, to that point, I would almost argue, like, if the higher your passion, the more you need to professionalize it and treat it as a business.
Yeah.
And it sounds probably like contradictory a bit, but I think, like for me, for example, Skinosh is my passion, and my only goal for Skinosh has always been to do this for the rest of my life. And it sounds very simple, but that means like you have to be able to live from that, You have to be able to progress.
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. And in order to do that, like in order to create more Skinnosh products, I need to treat it as a business.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
If you treat it as a hobby, you do it like 5 or 10 hours or whatever per week, then your passion is not as high.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I want to do this like 60 hours a week.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think I mean, I guess maybe in art, I think you get to that point. I think everybody starts out by, I mean, I presume, or at least from what my understanding of it is, everybody starts by doing it just a bit, and then more and more and more and more. And then you get to a point where you're sitting in the studio like 6 to 8 hours a day, which is a working day, and you almost don't even realize it. But at the end of the day, you're like, well, I spent the whole day in the studio because I had things to do, and I had certain structures in order for myself to keep on working, to keep on painting. Also, I think a big step for that is also what we're always talking about is always be fully stocked. You can't work if you don't have canvases, if you don't have paint, if you don't have leather. And if you start to think about it in those terms, you will soon realize that you need to professionalize it, because you need to go to the art supply store 4 days in advance to buy your weekly needs or whatever. You need to buy the leather much more in advance to be able to produce it, and almost like while producing it, think about the fact that you're gonna need leather at some point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I have hundreds of buckets in stock.
Exactly. And I think that's important to treat it that way, to always be able to do something at least. Go to the studio and do something. It doesn't matter what at the start, because the what, you're gonna find it along the way. But do something. And I mean, you and I are both very big Casey Neistat approvers, and I always liked his idea of treating not only the filming portion of his, I guess, day or work day as work, but also on the editing, on what comes after, etc. It's the same thing I always think when taking photos of works, or when documenting works in whatever way, that yes, it's a tedious process, because you need to grab that lamp and grab that light and do that, and maybe put a canvas over there so that it looks good, whatever. But it's all work. If you were to put as much work into the after editing of the work as much as you're doing the work itself, then you'd be miles ahead. I can guarantee that. But it's a difficult process, because sometimes you're in the studio, you have your product, your work, whatever, and you realize, man, I have absolutely zero idea how I'm gonna picture it, how I'm gonna photograph it. Not factually, but because it's such a tedious process that you almost would wish that somebody else would come in and say, hey, I'm gonna do that for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if there was like a technological way to give people the opportunity to experience it in person. Like that's what we talked about before as well. You're losing so much when you're taking a picture or a video versus reality. And I wish like people could touch the leather.
Yeah.
And have that experience, and that also speaks then again for like stores and galleries.
Yeah, absolutely, and also just doing exhibitions, doing pop-ups, showing the work physically, because I'm 100% convinced that even in our digital age, exhibitions and pop-ups and events where you can see the stuff and touch it and get a better understanding for it, I think that's still the way to go. It's also a very traditional kind of way of working, but I enjoy doing exhibitions very much. It's also a very stressful process, because it's more of like a logistical challenge, I think, rather than a creative one. But I love talking then to people in an environment I feel comfortable with, about the work, about anything. It doesn't even have to be about the work, just
Yeah.
getting that real relationship where you can be certain that the people that come to those events really understand the work, or actually even better, want to understand it.
Yeah.
Because that's I think a big point also to stores, galleries, and either fashion and art wanting to understand the product.
Yeah.
I think you can go the route where you're just gonna see some leather bag, whatever brand, and say, oh yeah, I like that because it looks good. But I think it's much more potent when you have an emotional connection to the product. I think that's what we're searching basically.
Yeah, and that was like normal, right? Back in the days where there was no online presence, social media, all that kind of stuff. You had to see the piece in person, right?
Yeah.
And then what would you say now in the world, like where everybody's an artist, right? How difficult is it, like if you're a true artist, like, and you're trying to differentiate?
Well, what is a true artist? I think it's the first question, because I ask myself that a lot. I think my explanation over the years is I think the true artist in the 21st century is still somebody that is willing to sacrifice himself for the work, even in an age where it's very easy actually to take the easy way out, the easy route, and do something else that you may be less passionate about, and maybe putting the work aside. I think being an artist means to sacrifice everything.
Yeah, my initial answer was going to be investment, and that means like investing time.
But it's still a sacrifice, so
Exactly.
you're right. Yeah,
That's what
absolutely.
I mean. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But obviously other factors as well, like talent, vision, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Plays into it.
Yeah.
But I find it like you probably don't use the hashtag art,
Nope.
right, or something like that, because there would be like a gazillion.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's, I think, probably like a big problem for you in comparison to me, right? When you have like a defined niche, where everybody knows, okay, there are a handful of brands, and then I know that my products are not relevant for people who buy Gucci.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I don't want them to.
Yeah.
But I think then, at least from my perspective, in an art world, it would be more difficult because you don't have those clearly defined sub-niches, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also a reason why generally, not only in painting, in art, but also in music and fashion too, I was never a big fan of like those genres or those subgenres.
Yeah.
It's more so a problem in music where you have like techno, then you have like intelligent techno, then you have dark techno. Like what the fuck is dark techno? It's still techno, you know?
It makes more sense to me than intelligent techno, actually.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah. I get what you mean. But I'm never a fan of subgenres.
I'm generally not a fan of genres because they put you in
a box. Yeah.
And they say this is what you are, and you're not allowed to move outside of it.
Exactly. But at the same time, I recognize that you need some parameters to contextualize the work and to and to actually articulate what it is about. Why is it for this person, not for that person, basically? And so I think a good way to not lose yourself in this clusterfuck of genres, emotions, brands, artists, whatever, is not necessarily to not look at it, but to try to not be bothered by it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very, very difficult process where I actually think it's a process of a lifetime. It's almost like reaching that sort of Zen Buddhism kind of thinking where you're not bothered by what other people are doing and why they're doing it and how their world works. Just stay focused on how you wish to do things. And if those things change from today to in 1 year or in 10 years, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
If you can articulate the change for yourself. I think it's very important to just stay true to most importantly, your own emotions, and to not let your emotions be dictated by categories, genres, galleries, trends, even also very important, much more important than fashion, I would think. And so I think also the trend part, I think it's very
so
interesting.
he's doing NFTs now.
Yeah, contact me for cheap NFTs of David's works and leather products. Yeah. No, but I think like, how is it in your case? I mean, trends really don't matter in your work, but do you find yourself going like, oh man, I could do that too, and then maybe I would sell more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. And there's like, you have to find the fine line, right? And that goes back to doing what you're passionate about and turning it into a business.
Yeah.
And the business part is that like selling something, or could be selling something that you don't like, but you know it sells well.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm not going that route, right? I don't have any products that would be like
B tier or C tier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have that. In the past, there were times where I did things that didn't feel good while doing them. That kind of felt forced, even. And I regret doing those a lot. Not necessarily that I haven't learned from it. You learn from everything.
That's what I want to say.
But
it's an important experience, and for you,
yeah.
now you know, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then if you never tried it, then you probably always wonder like, okay, maybe I should do it, blah, blah.
Exactly.
I think like from like the product range that I'm offering, like that's not even in. I couldn't even think of a product that would like be like a viral product. Or
Yeah.
Maybe that doesn't like fit into my category at all. I don't know.
Probably, maybe you don't even need that, because there are sometimes brands that have like those it products, you know what I mean, where they seemingly overnight have major success, and that product becomes like a core of that brand. And I think that's very lucky in those cases for those brands. Most of the time it doesn't work that way, and you have to build it over time.
I don't know. I don't really like the idea of having, let's say I created one product and everybody wants that, but nothing else. They wouldn't fulfill me. Like that would be probably good on the business side.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I would rather have 30 products that all sell medium well, rather than have one or two products that sell very well and the rest not. Because I put as much thought as in every product, like the same.
And then if it were to be that way, you'd always be limited to that product, you know what I mean? And I think
and then at some point you are the brand that created that product.
Exactly.
And that's it.
Exactly. And I think that's absolute hell. And that's also why I'm a big proponent of like, if an artist is doing Instagram, I guess semi-successfully, I think it's fair if you have changed your style over the years to not delete everything that was before and just present that certain picture of yourself of work that you're doing now. I think it's good to show the process, show the progress, and show maybe also what you're capable of doing in a way. Nobody's born with a certain set identity. You find your identity along the way. Some people find it earlier and some people find it later on. I mean, there are artists that like have found their own style and have become famous for that certain style. And those guys were maybe 50, 60 years old. So there's no rush and there's all the time in the world.
But you have to work hard to get to that point to define your style, artwork or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? If you lay in bed for 40 years, you won't find like you will still start from day one, right?
Absolutely, I agree 100%. Although I'm very fascinated. I've been thinking a lot the past few months about the concept of luck or being unlucky. I mean, historically there were many artists that just had a shit ton of luck and just were in the right places at the right time, picked up the right brush, the right color at the right time,
Well, think of all the ones who were successful when they were dead.
Exactly. For example, and so I'm very fascinated by the idea of luck and if you actually can provoke luck. If you work hard, does luck then come automatically, or is it just by pure fucking chance? Because there are, again, historically and even today, many artists that have their big break before others and some later on, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But
Don't you think that all of those who are working hard? I'm a strong believer in creating your own luck. There's a saying which I'm completely butchering now, but if you want to get wet, get outside, and it will rain eventually, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I strongly believe in that. Like if you lay in bed all day, you probably won't be lucky.
Yeah.
Well, if you play the lottery from your phone, maybe, who
Yeah.
knows? But I think like you have to work really, really hard and expose yourself to luck.
Absolutely.
That's what I believe in.
Absolutely, I agree. Although there are maybe I'm speaking of like anomalies in the art world, but I'm very fascinated by those cases where luck is prevalent. Like for example, Van Gogh was fucking unlucky. He didn't sell any paintings in his life, you know. And then again, you have some people call him like the Italian, even though he actually wasn't Italian. He was Swiss, I think. The Italian Van Gogh, he's called Ligabue, and he was also like a very outsider. It was one of the first documented cases in art history of like depression and mental illness, and that it played a big role even when he was alive. Yet he kind of remained relevant and like sold some paintings, made a decent living for himself, but he definitely worked hard on his paintings. But I don't know, maybe like socially speaking, how hard he worked to get his paintings out there, you know what I mean? So that I'm fascinated by.
Yeah.
So those instances where I guess the stars align, maybe you know that person that knows that person that fully gets it, and then you're in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But you still have to do the work.
Absolutely.
Like there's no way around that.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
And the work can be divided into making your product, painting, whatever.
Yeah.
And then marketing it,
Yeah.
speaking to people, etc. They can be divided, but if you are not doing any work,
no,
there is no luck. Yeah.
No, it's not gonna happen, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think also like in today's world, I think you need to work even harder because there's so much stuff out there. There's so much competition. There's so much also good art there. Like I mean, I feel like we've been shitting on the art world for like 45 minutes, but at its core, there is much more good art in today's world. The possibilities are even greater than they once were, where you basically had just oil and canvases. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And that's where I wanted to go with that question actually in the beginning. It's like, how do you differentiate yourself in a world where everybody's an artist? Is obviously not true, but way more artists and different. You have digital art, you have traditional, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they all use the same hashtag, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's way more difficult than in fashion.
Yeah. I
Right.
think so too.
Where you say hashtag avant-garde and everybody knows.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah. I always say this, but like fashion has certain parameters. A bag needs to be a bag, a shirt needs to be a shirt. You can play around with it, but at the end of the day, you're restricted to those very formal parameters.
Yeah.
And art is so vast and so subjective and so unreliant on a certain particular medium. Even going as far as to forego the medium with like digital art. Yeah. Fashion, I guess most of the times you can touch, you can wear a painting. It's there to be admired. It's there to be contemplated, not necessarily to be consumed and to be worn. You know what I mean? So I think that's the most difficult part when talking about the differences maybe between fashion and art, I think art exists almost metaphysically and needs to be understood to be consumed. My wish is for art to be for everybody, but I know that's not the case.
But do you think that's reality, that people understand their art that they bought? I don't think so.
No.
They probably pretend to understand it.
Not to go into it too deeply, but I recall one instance where somebody was looking at a sculpture and was like, what's the guy's name that does those sculptures? And somebody told it, somebody told the name of the artist, like a local artist. Some collector was like, oh yeah, I have works from him. And I was like, you've bought a sculpture that is like presumably worth between like 5,000 and 10,000 euros, and you don't even know the name of the artist. And I was so shook really to my core, and I was like, man, I don't want to work in those parameters.
Yeah. And that's probably also a difference between the art and, I mean, there's similarities probably in fashion where it's like about status, right?
Yeah.
Of course, there's big similarities.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, but not so much in the avant-garde niche,
Yeah.
probably. Still, if you have like a collector's CCP piece,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But I think like then you have the whole dimension in art where people buy it as an investment, and all that, which would be a separate video. So
Yeah. Stay tuned.
No, but I think we're closing the video. Thank you guys for watching. Let us know your thoughts down in the comment. Would be interesting. We're both engaging in the comments, right?
Yeah.
I link Dan's Instagram, all that jazz below.
Exactly.
So check it out and don't
See you
wonder
next
about
time.
the funny hats.
We're taking them off right as the video closes.
Yeah,
don't
crazy
worry.
day today. Thank you guys for watching. See you in the
Thank
next
you.
one.